I came to Duke in 1970 from Tulane University in New Orleans. I came here as a resident in the Department of Surgery under world-famous surgeon David Savaston. We had an active research program in transplantation and had done experimental transplants in animals for several years before we actually did our first human liver transplant. Paul Killenberg was the hepatologist. Bill Myers was the surgical hepatology person. Dick McCann was the vascular surgeon, and I was the transplant surgeon. That first liver transplant done with Dick McCann and Bill Myers was one of the most momentous moments in my medical career. First patient was a young lady, I'll call her JB, who had a huge hepatoma. And so I can remember riding over to Regional Hospital in my little Scamp and removing the liver and then putting it on ice and taking it across town with no ambulances or sirens, just a little Scamp and the resident with me in the front seat, and taking it back to Duke Hospital where we implanted that liver into JB. And by the time we had JB in the intensive care unit, we were truly exhausted, but the happiest we'd ever been as a transplant team. As soon as she was extubated, she said, "Thank you. Thank you for another chance." And she lived for more than 20 years and had a chance to see her two little daughters grow to adulthood because of that liver transplant. So it was a momentous occasion. And I think that that set the stage for our whole multi-organ transplant program. It wasn't just the surgeons, it was the nurses, the anesthesiologists, the technicians, the whole team felt tremendously rewarded for helping that young lady survive an otherwise fatal disease. Well, since I, quote, retired, close quote, I've continued to work with Bill Parker in the transplant immunology laboratory. And as a byproduct of our transplant research, we found a possible function for the human appendix. So that's been a continuing intellectual stimulation to take part in a more basic research program. Here at home, I spend as much time as possible with my grandchildren. I have 4 little grandsons, ages 4 to 11. Every month we get over to Ohio, or they come over here, so we have a chance to fish and hike and otherwise enjoy the little boys growing up. Took a Durham Tech course in masonry, and so I've started to lay some bricks. We have a garden, which I love to spend time in. I'm doing some carpentry work now to repair an old barn, so I'm not lacking for things to do. Oh, are you kidding me?
I came to Duke in 1995 to be director of the Comprehensive Cancer Center. I've been a long-time member, of a number of cancer societies, including the American Cancer Society. I think that my greatest contribution to science was the technology to isolate human stem cells and to use these to repopulate patients who couldn't regrow their own stem cells. Contribution to science was developing drugs to treat cancer, in particular a drug called cyclophosphamide. My current best reward is to see the scientists that I helped mentor and develop out there doing their own thing. I enjoy birding. I'm a big fan of birds, and I like to do bird photography and study birds and their habits. Our daughter lives out in Saxapahaw, and there's a nice creek that goes very close to her house, and so I enjoy going out in the canoe that they have and fishing. My hobby is literature. Currently, what I'm reading is books, a huge volume on Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln is one of my favorite heroes because he was such a fantastic man, and so I love to read about him. It was my good fortune to be very interested in literature as well as other things. I was able to enroll in a number of upper-level literature courses. I met this co-ed named Arlene, whom I liked very much, and that situation where I was with her at a lot of the literature classes led to a marriage and our 4 wonderful children. I've been lucky enough to have a wonderful family. I have 4 wonderful children and 5 wonderful grandchildren.
Well, I came to Duke in 1953 as a first-year student at Trinity College. And then I went to medical school here and graduated in 1959. And I stayed at Duke essentially from being an undergraduate to a medical student, house officer, faculty member. All totaled, I was at Duke for 37 years. Minus 2, because I was at the NIH during 2 of those years. So it was 35 years. So I decided to pick the day I was admitted to Duke Medical School. Photograph taken at Turnage's restaurant in 1953. It shows on the far right of the picture the first dean and the dean who was here when I came to Duke Medical School, who was Wilbur Davidson. But I chose this picture to illustrate the young lady to Dean Davidson's immediate right, who was Barry Altvater, then a senior in high school at Salem Academy in Winston-Salem, subsequently came to Duke. I met her right after I started my first year in medical school at Duke, and we have been married for 50-plus years. And I think most of my great moments at Duke were really shared with her. She was a very important part of it. We dissected cadavers in those days. She used to come up to see what that was about. I'm not quite sure how I ever really made a positive impression on her, because I always smelled like formaldehyde. The faculty at Duke at that time were the original faculty, largely, which made being at Duke a very interesting place, because it was still quite young and evolving and getting better, of course. I had a lot of extraordinary mentors during my period of time at Duke. None of those was really more important to me or longer in our relationship than Dr. Stead. I have read a lot in retirement, and I suppose if there was any single theme, it would be history. The one I'm working on right now was triggered by a book by Greg Berman called A Most Noble Adventure. And it's the story of the 5 or 6 people who, together with General Marshall, were really responsible for creating the Marshall Plan. Family and visiting with grandchildren is a big piece of retirement. We have a piece of property here that was owned by my wife's parents. It has a 1753 grist mill on it. So a part of our year in retirement is spent really working on the mill, working on the land, a lot of time outside, a lot of exercise. And I love to sail, and sailing is really one of my principal activities up there. It's a wonderful experience because when you're sailing on the coast of Maine, it's hard to have anything else on your mind, and that's a form of relaxation. Barry and I have 3 children. We have 3 grandchildren. One of our oldest grandson, who is 14, will be up for what we call Camp Wallace, spending a week with us at the farm and then a week with us in Maine during our trip up there.
I came to Duke in 1980 to the Department of Psychiatry. I was there almost 29 years. The longest I've ever spent with a single patient was 20 years. I think people that ended up staying with me so long had really terrible lives, and I could keep them going. They were very sad at my leaving, and then were able to work through the grief of things that had happened 40 years ago and go on with their lives. And I felt like I made the greatest benefit to patients during that time. And they gave me presents, things. One patient gave me something. She wanted to give me comfort, like I gave my patients comfort. Gave me a neck warmer or something. Just very, very touching. I have a daughter who's in her early 30s. And I think being the parent was probably the most important thing I ever did in life, you know, to nurture and help a person develop and grow has been extremely significant. Much of the time I was a single parent, so I was working and trying to juggle parenting and my career, and it was a challenge, but it was very, very, very special. She went hiking with me on my 50th birthday. We went hiking on the Appalachian Trail, and it was one of the rare March snows. We resurrected my canoe, hadn't been in the water for a long time, got a little trailer for it, so we'll do a lot of whitewater canoeing. I have always had a passion to dance. When I was 50, I started the Polish folk dance and then found my new partner and significant other, and it's just marvelous. It's so freeing. We do choreographed ballroom dancing and go all around the country dancing. We can dance 6 hours a day at week-long conferences, so it's great exercise. Shortly after we started to dance, we were involved in a very bad auto accident. My leg was crushed. My first question, you know, when I started to feel a little better was, when can I dance? And I'm also working with the medical students, the practice course. And I hope to read to kids. I've got a puppet that I got ready, a Hedwig puppet, a white owl. Definitely.